Hello everyone, it's Tuesday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. South Korea is rapidly approaching a demographic cliff as it continues to suffer from a plunging birth rate, the lowest among OECD members. Soared housing prices, high private education expenses for children, and an atmosphere where parents cannot readily avail of childcare leave are all making couples unwilling to have a child. The government has spent a whopping 271 trillion Korean won since 2006. That is more than 200 billion US dollars to raise the birth rate, only to fail. How do demographic experts see the country's low birth rate? And what do they see as the main reasons for this? How should the country view this issue to effectively tackle it? For this, we have invited Professor Hwang Myung-jin from Korea University into the studio. Welcome, Professor Hwang.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. And we also have Dr. Willem Adema, a senior economist from the OECD's Social Policy Department. Good to see you, Dr. Adema.
Good to see you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us. Now, Dr. Adema, first question. South Korea's total fertility rate dipped to 0.78 last year. How is the figure compared to other countries, and how serious is this issue?
Yes, you're right. As you said in your introduction, the total fertility rate in Korea is lower than in any other OECD country at 0.78. The average for the OECD is 1.58. And the other thing to keep in mind is that the trend in OECD countries is downward. In 1970, for example, across the OECD, the average total fertility rate was almost 3 children per woman. And in Korea, it was 4.5 children per woman. So the trend in Korea has been downward much more rapidly than elsewhere. Now, in combination with something which is very enjoyable, i.e. people live longer, you see that the Korean population is aging, and that has implications for the future in terms of working age population, which may be declining unless you draw on migration, for example. And you will also see more fiscal strain because there's a larger group in your population which is elderly and has needs in terms of pensions and long-term care.
Right, I see. It's quite unfortunate to hear the figure is much lower than the OECD average. Now, Dr. Adema, we need to know the reasons behind such a low fertility rate if we are to tackle each of them. Long working hours have been cited as one of the reasons. How long are working hours in South Korea, and how does that affect the birth rate?
Well, I mean, it's not just the working hours. It's the whole atmosphere at the workplace culture. It's the long working hours. It's the habit of socializing after work with your colleagues. It's the long commuting times. And if you all add that up, then you have very little time to engage in a family life or even go out dating prior to establishing a family. So that is the issue. The thing is, which is very important to keep in mind, there is no single one cause of the dropping fertility rate. It is a combination of factors, sometimes part of the workplace culture, the lack of policy support, in which case the Korean government has done a lot, as you mentioned in your introduction, to try and address that issue. But there's also issues around the cost of housing, the cost of private education, and there is a change in attitudes going on across the OECD. Maybe it is sharper and more pronounced in Korea than elsewhere, but there is a growing group of younger people who find that they can value their life, their well-being, without having children, without establishing a family. So there is a change in norms going on. It started recently, and we haven't got the very hard-nosed evidence to underpin that, but we can see it happening around us.
All right, I see. Well, we are going to tap on each and every reason for behind the low fertility rate. But before that, Professor Hwang, Dr. Adema already mentioned the issues in the atmosphere of the workplace. And South Korea has a system of letting parents to go on a childcare leave after the maternity leave is over. But many reports say that it is not being readily used. Why is this?
Well, as of November 2023, we does have the system that allows people to take the childcare leave after the maternity leave. But in fact, despite the system is existing that provide benefit, it's very widely unused, and there are several reasons for that. First one is traditional the mother's image and roles of a woman's role. Mother have to take care of their children. That's one thing. That's very firmly existing throughout the society over the years. Second one is financial consideration. If mothers or parents take the child care leave, then their benefits, especially wages, not fully compensated, and there are no other alternative income sources. That might cause another problem. Well, third one is more serious problem. It's about job security. If you take too long to take one maternity leave and second child care leave, you take 2 or 3 years in consecutive, and they're endanger the job security. So people, especially parents, very hardly take over that kind, unless they have alternative resources. And more importantly, maybe is from my concern is the culture and the workplace stigma. Anybody who take that the benefit, some people might think that they're taking advantage of the system too eagerly. That is pretty much against our social norm in terms of the regulation and law, but still people have to support any absence or leaves of their co-workers. That really causes some problem and conflict in the working places. That might be some of the reason that people are not actively taking over this child care benefit.
Right, I see. I mean, the atmosphere should definitely change. And that being said, Professor Hwang, the Presidential Committee on Aging Society and Population Policy is going to introduce mandatory child care leave, which will start right after the end of maternity leave and no longer require approval by employers. But some say this is impractical. What measures should be in place to make this an effective measure?
Well, I think law is law. To make it successfully implemented, we have to see how people live and interact with each other so far, and how that might have changed. People's behavior pattern might be changed after this. Well, some pessimistic view is, I think, the widely prevailing, because laws are not very micro accurate. Well, of course, the law is law, so that's like, as you mentioned, the atmosphere, environment, and then to make this kind of the new laws and policies successfully implemented to our society, we have to understand that we live in very complex and heterogeneous society, and even younger generation might have different life goals and the reason to raise their children, and maybe the feeling burdensome of how they live and support their children are very different and complicated. So instead of enacting and passing the new laws and regulation, we might have to think about what they really want. Right. Well, regulation is definitely not the first option that we have to think about. And we have to listen to their voices, and they're quite different voices to hear.
Right, I cannot agree more. Now, Dr. Adema, the reason why we're having discussion is to make a society where employees feel they can take childcare leave more actively. How would such an atmosphere be created?
Well, changing attitudes always takes time. So it won't happen from one day to the other. But employers can do their fair share in this area. In Korea, a lot of women have been hesitant to take even maternity leave in order, and one of the reasons would be that they fear that their colleagues may have to work more if they take leave. One of the issues around that, of course, is that employers could take on replacement workers, as happens in many OECD countries, to cover for the leave period. So that is one thing. In terms of fathers taking leave, companies can be encouraging their workers to take the leave. It is well known that, and that is across the OECD, but in Korea and Japan, it is a particularly strong feeling that if men take their leave, this may be having negative repercussions for their career later on. And the company, middle management, has to make it clear to their workers that no, it is good, it is okay if you take your leave, and they could lead by example. In terms of policy, the policies are there, but could there be stronger policing of the policies? Could there be more effective sanctions on employers if they don't comply with the legislation?
Right.
Then again, like I said, it's not going to happen from one day to another. Changing norms, attitudes, and workplace cultures takes time.
Right, it's not going to be easy, but we definitely need to go through this tough process to make an environment where employees can freely use their maternity leave and also the child care leave. All right, well, Professor Hwang, another reason for the low birth rate is high private education expenses. How much economic pressure are South Korean parents feeling in terms of child's education, and how is that affecting birth rate?
The cost of private education and housing are not just the two main reasons for the low fertility, but the whole cause of the social problem in general in the nation. Well, speaking of the cost of private education, the financial stress might be the main causes, consequences of, And the second one is that really affect or make people to determine the fear children at birth and raise, because the parents want to strategize raising one or two children instead of the multiple children, because they need to put more emphasis on education. And that also causes of delays in childbirth, because if you're not financially solvent and to raise the children, that the people want to delay the making. Even the married couples might have considered delaying their childbirth.
Right.
And another thing is, of course, always the gender equality, and this time the class and different types of inequality. Well, because of the high cost of private education, the class mobilization is seriously hindering that, because the overall problem in our society in terms of the vitality and energy and reform and all the necessary changes, actively adapting to the changes in society and environment. And because of the high cost of private education, this is quite concerned that public education has not been playing its own critical roles, and where are teachers, and the recent days teachers might have many regret of current situation because they are not respected as much as they used their parents' generation. They're all the cause are I don't know why is that so important to have raise children and educate them. I mean, we have some obvious reason, but the consequence is not really something that we expected, and it's not really a productive and functioning way. So we have to stop having this kind of social phenomena.
Right, it's a complicated issue indeed. Well, Dr. Adema, not just high education expenses, high housing costs could also be one of the reasons, and this could be highly related to population concentration in the metropolitan area. How severe is population concentration in South Korea, and how does such high housing expenses affect the fertility rate?
Well, you've got a lot of people living in big cities. I mean, if you've got a population of what, 51 million, 10 million is in Koreans are in Seoul, but the wider area of Seoul includes Incheon with another couple of million people. So the concentration of people is quite sharp. How is this affecting family formation? Well, first of all, if youngsters cannot leave their parents' place, then it's hard for them to establish relationships with others and find their way on the property ladder. In fact, a lot of young Koreans have great difficulty buying a place or stumping up the on-site payment. So even private rental issues are important. If you cannot establish yourself in the labor market and in the housing market, it's difficult to establish yourself in the marriage market, so to speak. So the housing costs first negatively affect family formation for very young people who want to leave their parental home. Then for young couples, it is difficult and expensive to find a place where they could have a small family. And if you want larger families, you obviously need more space, and then you have to move out to an even more expensive place. So housing costs play a role in fertility trends, and much more so than in the past. In recent work, in a recent study we did, we found that in econometric modeling, it has a negative effect on fertility trends.
All right, I see. Well, Dr. Adema, up until now, we have been talking about the reasons behind this low fertility rate. And now I'd like to tap on the solutions. For South Korea's looming demographic cliff, some say increasing the number of immigrants could be the only solution. Could this help?
Well, it's not the only solution, but it certainly can help. When you have a dwindling working age population, a well-managed migration policy can certainly help to sustain your working age population and to sustain the skills needed to keep your economy going. So from that perspective, it can certainly make a contribution. If I look at the experience other countries, other OECD countries have with this in terms of the fertility behavior of migrants, they may have a higher fertility behavior when in their country of origin than in most of the countries, OECD countries where they went to. But within 1 or 2 generations, their behavior adjusts to their new country. So yes, it will be important in terms of economic growth, contribution to the working age population and the skill set of the population. In terms of fertility behavior, it will have also an effect on sustaining birth rates, but at some point the behavior of migrants will become similar to the original South Korean population.
All right, I see your point. Now, Professor Hwang, it's not like South Korea did not put any efforts to tackle this issue. I mean, it spent more than $200 billion to tackle this issue over the past 16 years, but nothing has properly worked. Why is this?
Well, I always believe that the speed is not important. The direction is more important. But so far, we have pretty much studied about the root causes and the consequences and policy reaction against the population change, especially the downturned trend of low fertility. Most of theories and approaches or perspectives are pretty much what we learn from Western society, especially Malthusian and neo-Malthusian approaches, and that has a little different background of what society should be and what people are likely and how we make a family and how we work kind of thing. Individualism and based on religion and Christianity. All those are created and developed during the Enlightenment Renaissance era. The Korea might have similar civilization, and we have the Confucius tradition and philosophy, and that pretty much dominate and conquered, 1,000, I guess, years of our society. Similarity and difference are existing, the Western and the Eastern, the philosophy about the country, state, the family, individual. And the most important thing is the family. Korean and traditional Asian or Confucius family or familyness is far different from the Western society, especially after the Industrial Revolution, years ago. And while Western society have more focus on individual liberation, that's pretty much gained from the income stability and political participation. Korean society might have developed our own civilization in modern society based on the family. Family is the reason and the only means to end kind of thing. But since we had the one child, not China has the policy, but Korea also takes a similar the very intensive child, what do you call it, the fertility, oppressing the policy, childbirth policy. So one child is not really nuclear family. From my understanding, the family system theory might explain that the parent system and the children system and the exchange of parent-child system are two subsystems that really work together in one nuclear family. But since we had only one child, there's no children system, and only child is the center of the family system. And parent, is supposed to be a romantic relationship, might have to focus more on child care, and they forget how to live in a romantic relationship with the spouses. That causes more problem than other economic or, the education, housing problem. Korean couple, maybe not everybody, but a few youngsters and my generation as well, we forgot how to love each other as a parent, the husband and wives. We have to regain the reason that why families exist. It's love, and we just forgot about it. I'm talking too, naive and more in the abstractive term, but that is the value system that we have to sustain and maintain. And that's a little different from Western's advising and teaching on us. So maybe we have to gain our own insight about what to then, how we develop our own policy and the reaction toward this demographic changes.
Right, we'd have to consider more of South Korea's own characteristics when it comes to tackling this kind of issues. All right, well, I'd like to ask many more questions to our experts, but unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Professor Hwang, for your time and insights.
Thanks so much for listening to me.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Adema, for your time and insights as well. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll see you the next time around.
Sure. Thank you. All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.